Hello and welcome back to our Matthew Bible study. We have been in a train of thought. Jesus had talked about his coming. That was 2 lessons ago. And then, if you remember, he is continuing that idea. When is he coming? And so we looked at some information on that. And last week, we looked at a wedding. So, just to remind you, if you're following along with our study, you can find our worksheets at www.oldunioncoc.com. There's some other things there, some other lessons if you would like to follow. But that's where you can find a worksheet to go along with this video. So, last week we looked at a parable right after he discussed when he is coming. And so we looked at some customs of Jewish weddings that we probably don't understand here in the 21st century. I hope you enjoyed that study. I know I did. This morning, I want us to jump right in. But before I do, remember, you are invited to the wedding. What wedding am I talking about? Well, when the bridegroom comes back, right, and the bride, the church, they are united on the day of judgment, and then they will go into heaven. And that's a lot of what that parable was about. If you want to pause and look at that slide, we would encourage you to do that and hope that you will do some Bible study on how you can be right with God. Well, he's still talking about, remember what? His coming, what it's going to look like, and the kingdom of heaven is like. We have looked at a lot of parables. I'm going to move a little fast today because I want to make sure I get everything in the time that I try to allot myself. We're going to look at another parable. It's really one of the last of the kingdom parables. It's not the last parable, but it is kind of one of the last of the kingdom of parables. Although the story we tell at the end today is somewhat like a parable. So we're in Matthew 25. We're in Matthew 25, continuing our study. And so here we go. Matthew 25, verse 14. For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to the one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1. To each according to his own ability, and immediately he went on a journey. A master is going out of town. What is Jesus hinting at here? That he will be leaving them. Remember parables, that they're often a story that maybe everything's just not right there in front. They're going to have to do some thinking about it. And remember, at this point, they can't imagine Jesus not being there. But he talks about a master who's going away on a journey. And he leaves each of his servants here some talents. 5, 2, and 1. And notice it says, according to their ability. What they were able to handle. Then who had received the 5 talents went and traded them and made another 5 talents. And likewise, who had received 2 gained 2 more. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So, notice what it says. What? It says after a long time, the master came back. Well, how long is a long time? Well, again, I think Jesus is hinting some things here. So, this is about a man who's traveling. He's entrusting his servants. Remember, when he's out of town, business still has to go on. Today, we're so used to being able to do that through an app or through email. But you would have brought in who? Your trusted servants. And said, I'm going away. I need you to keep the household, keep the farm, keep the business, whatever it is, running. Well, that's what's going to happen with Jesus, right? He's going to leave. And when he leaves it in the hands of 11 people. Each with their own abilities. So, we're going to look at this parable here. Now, talent here refers to a sum of money. I think when we hear talent, we hear some kind of ability, right? Oh, that person is talented, or America's got talent, right? No, this is the idea that money was left. Now, I believe the two can be somewhat parallel here, right? I think we can talk about the abilities that God gives us, because each is given to his own ability. But I think also that God gives us something important to manage while he's gone. And those may be your finances, those may be your time, those may be the knowledge and the way you have to share that with people, or those of you who are very good at thinking and planning, the way you're helping out with the kingdom, whatever it is that God has given you. And remember, he's given each of us to our own abilities. And I think that's a problem sometimes. I think sometimes we're jealous. Even in the church, we're jealous of someone else's abilities. And because we don't have that ability, We think we're not as important. Please notice, each of them were given according to their abilities. They were given something that they were supposed to get. I wonder how many of us have an ability we haven't shared with our church family because it's not like someone else's. Well, one got 5, one got 2, one got 1. They weren't like each other. So, that's what happens here. In the parable we looked at last week, the parable of the foolish virgins, they were preparing and watching. Well, now, these guys are productive and working. See, Jesus is going to go. And are you just supposed to sit around and wait for his return? If the apostles had done that, think about what would have happened to the church. If our generation does that, what happens to the teachings of Christ? So keep in mind, all three were servants, right? That they were dedicated to the master. And we as Christians are servants of Christ, dedicated to the master and to his cause. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained more talents beside them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You are faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of the Lord. Good job. That's what his master says. Good job. You have increased what I have given you. He also, who had received 2 talents, came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of the Lord. I want you to notice twice there, the joy of the Lord. It's like a wedding, remember? It's supposed to be exciting when God is coming back. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid, and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. The third servant comes in and says, I was afraid. I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know what to do with this. And so I hid it. I wonder if any of us ever hide our Christianity or hide our morals or our beliefs, or we have opportunity sometimes to speak up and to let people see that there is a different way to look at this world. And instead we just kind of hold on to it, right? We don't share it with anyone. But the Lord answered and said to him, You wicked and lazy servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. Therefore take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. I want you to hear that part of the story. If we're not using what God has given us, then God may reward someone else with that ability, and then oftentimes we then get jealous. We say things like, well, I had that idea. I could have done that. Then why didn't you? Why didn't you step up when your church was looking for volunteers? Well, why didn't you step up when you saw a need? Why, when you had an idea, didn't you go forward and say, hey, I'm going to do this in the name of Christ? What he reaps where he does not sow. If God's behind it, it's going to succeed. Doesn't mean it'll always be easy, but it's going to succeed. So, this one makes excuses. He says, you're a hard man. Yes, following God is hard sometimes. The decisions we have to make, the things we have to sacrifice, but they are nothing compared to the glory we're going to get in the end. Many of you have done hard things. Many of you who are listening to this lesson have gone back to school, or you changed jobs, or you moved, or you had to remove yourself from a dangerous relationship, or you had to make some tough financial decisions. I mean, we've done hard things, and we look back and we see how those hard things shaped us into who we are. Well, this man made no hard decisions. He just buried the money. He didn't even put it in the bank. The master says, at least you could have put it in the bank and it would have gained some. At least it would have done. Come on, do something with what God has given you. Notice the Lord's response. A wicked and late. Remember, the others come into the joy of the Lord. He calls this one a wicked and lazy servant. I don't know how you want to be addressed on Judgment Day when you meet Jesus, but I don't think this is what we want him to address us by. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. Now I know there are some that use this verse to preach prosperity gospel. I would be very careful of that. Yes, we have people in the Bible who are very wealthy who follow God and are blessed. We also have people in the Bible who are very poor that follow God, and they too are blessed. All blessings are not monetary. I think that's something that's a part of our culture and our mindset as Christians. There are lots of blessings outside the monetary. Now, Jesus uses money here because it's something that people would have understood. We still get it. I think many times, again, we forget it is money that he's talking about. We often make that parallel, though, to talents, to abilities, things and blessings and abilities, gifts that God has given us. And I think that's also a way to apply this. Notice it says here, more will be given. The one who had 10 ended up with the guy who gave his one away, right? Well, you say, well, that's not fair. Yeah, because he knew how to use what God gave him. I think a lot of us forget that as we grow in the kingdom, we gain more. We gain more talents, more ability. We're able to do more because we are stronger. See, most of us want to do the big thing without doing the small things. I mentioned in a lesson recently about going on an 8-mile hike. I love the 8-mile hike. I want to do the big thing. But I don't even want to get up from the couch and cross the room when I realize I've left my phone or the remote on the other side. Now, you laugh at that, and those of you who know me may really laugh at that. But here's what I want you to hear. We often want to do the big God things, not the day-to-day. You know how we grow stronger? The day-to-day. Doing it every day, consistently. Those of you who work out, those of you who are in sports, those of you who are learning a foreign language, those of you who are learning some kind of new thing, it's every day getting a little more and a little more and a little more. You can't do the big until you've done the small, right? That's how, remember, most of us don't remember learning to walk. Some of you may have had to relearn to walk. Maybe you had a stroke or an injury or a knee replacement. But we got up. We fell down as a child and we got up. Sometimes as adults we fall down and we just lay there. Guys, it's getting up. Even in this time of isolation, it's getting up and keep moving forward, even in the small, right? Even in the small. Notice what happens to the servant who doesn't use what God has given him. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. He doesn't get to stay in the kingdom. Now, guys, this is not the first time we've seen someone be able to be separated from the kingdom. We've looked at multiple parables. Each received an amount based on their skills. Guys, those of you who see someone with a talent at your church, some people are very good at listening. They've probably developed that talent. Yes, some of them may have been born with it, but some of them may have developed it. Some of you may be appreciative of someone who has patience. Again, that for many of us is a learned skill. Maybe you look to someone who's a teacher and you think, oh, what a great teacher. I have a feeling if you could have heard their first lesson, right, that it may not have been as good as where they are. They've grown a little bit over time. I think we often forget we run into people at different points in their life. We don't know what it took to get them there. We don't always know the situations that people find themselves in, where they are slowly making those baby steps and getting a little closer to that goal or getting a little better in their craft. So, they're each given according to their own ability. The parable also refers to people in the kingdom and the return of Jesus. That's us. What are we doing with the things that God has given us? Are we using them? Are we hiding them? I know that right now it may be harder to be visible, or maybe it's easier to be visible. Think about the opportunities you have had in this shutdown to check on a neighbor, or to encourage someone at work, or to connect with someone on a Zoom. maybe opportunities you would not have had otherwise, and they hinted at things that were going on in their life or they were struggling. Man, these have been some great opportunities. Each person in the kingdom will be held accountable for what they've done with what's been given to them. Did you ever think about that? I seem to have the ability to teach. At least some of you tell me I do, and I'm appreciative of that. I'm glad I'm using that talent today for the kingdom. I use it in other ways, and some of you have some great talents that you use in the work world, which could be used in the kingdom world. I'm often amazed at people who are good with finance, but they don't serve on the finance committee of their church. Or there are people who are in healthcare, but they don't go into their congregation or their church and they say, hey, here's some things I noticed that we're not doing to serve those that have medical issues. Some of you are good at architecture, and maybe you need to use that to help redesign a classroom or some other part of a physical building. Now, we're not using our buildings right now a lot, but what a great time to get them ready. Guys, it's using what we have when we have. And I hope that you'll hear that in this story. So, there are some analogies here in the parable. They are on the worksheet, and I'm going to put them here. And I think you are smart enough in our study that we've had to look at this. You can pause the video here because I really want to get on to what I think is also a part of this story. All right, here are the things that Jesus talks about. Here are the things that I believe he is saying, hey, these are what they are as we look into the parable. So, God's looking for results, not excuses. Did you hear that? God's looking for results. I think a lot of us might be surprised on Judgment Day. We may not even know the results of some of the things we did. And some of us may just have excuses. So, different talents, same responsibility. Use what God has given you. And some will rejoice. And some will weep. Guys, some people realize they wasted their time. Some of you, in this lockdown, you thought, you know what, I'm going to get everything done. I'm going to clean out the junk drawer. I'm going to reorganize my closet. And here we are. 2+ maybe 3 months into this. And some of you are going back to work and none of those things got done. Did you waste that time? Maybe you developed a new talent. Maybe some of you have gone back to cooking or maybe you're writing letters again. I don't know what it is. Or did we just sit here and moan and bemoan? And now that time that we were given, maybe a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, is gone. So, there's some verses there if you want to pause and look at some application for this. And again, determining our talents. We don't all have the same talents. We have different talents. Some are easier to see and some aren't. And we learn through trial and error of what we're good at and what we're not. And we also might ask people, what are my talents? What am I good at? I teach high school students, and I often say, did you ever notice how good you are at blank? And they had not. They assumed everybody was good at that. They thought that was a natural thing. No, that they were a good writer, or they were a good thinker, or they were a good question asker, or I could tell they were compassionate, or they were kind, or they were interested in certain things. Sometimes we need to say to people, tell me some things I'm good at. I think often we beat ourselves up over the things that we're not good at, or the talents we don't have. What about what we do have? How can we use that for kingdom work? Well, I want to transition. Remember, this is a continuous speech that Jesus is giving. We are breaking up into lessons. I wish we could just sit here and discuss it for an hour, 2 hours at length, but I understand the idea of attention span, right? He is continuing to talk about what? This kingdom. And he's going to give an example. Remember, he didn't stop and pause and do all the talking that we're doing. They're having to do all that in their brain and say, whoa, what is that story about? The master going away and coming back and talents. And then he immediately launches, before their brain can get all the way around that, he launches into the next story, right? You could call this the parable of the sheep and the goats, right? It's kind of a parable. Let's jump into it. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. Remember we looked at the wedding, the idea of the groom coming, right, with the wedding party, right, the angels, the things that are happening here. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on the right hand, but the goats on the left. Jesus is using an agricultural parable something they would have understood, bringing in livestock and then separating them by sheep and goats. Something they would have seen maybe 100 times. Not something we've probably seen so much in our culture, but we've separated things or divided things or sorted things out, right? So he says there's going to be this division, right? And what he's beginning to talk about is judgment. He just talked about judgment, right? About when he comes back and the things and the talents he's given. Well, now he's continuing that theme. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, "Come, you blessed of my Father." Now there he is, the king. Remember, we've been looking at Jesus as king, the kingdom parables. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, "Come, you blessed of my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." God has been planning for you from day one. How long have you been planning for God? "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Guys, this sounds a lot like some teachings Jesus had done earlier. Remember when we kind of started and we talked about the Sermon on the Mount, right? Blessed are, blessed are, blessed are. Here's some people who, because of you, they were hungry and they had food. They were thirsty and they drank. And Jesus says, I was. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? When did we see you king?" Right, guys? People knew when the king came to town. When the king came to town, he came with an entourage. You would have known you were serving the king. Now, there are stories, again, about kings who disguise themselves, like the prince and the pauper, right? And they try to blend in and be a regular guy. No, you would have known who the king. And they said, "When did we do these things to you?" And the king will answer and say, "Surely I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me." When you do it to the least, you're doing it to the king. Guys, so many of us would love to worship and to work for Jesus, right? We would like to be right there by him in a banquet. But how many of us are willing to invite someone else to the banquet, or to sit with people who are uncomfortable at the banquet? You know, to serve Jesus, oh, glory, honor. He says, what about serving mankind? Because mankind is made in the likeness of God. This is something we teachers do sometimes. This is called a wordle. You put a document, or in this case a passage in, and the words that repeat themselves get larger, so you can see what the words that maybe are important or the author was trying to emphasize. When you put Matthew 25, 31 through 46 in a wordle, I want you to see one of the biggest words is gave. Do you ever give of yourself? Or do you always want? And that's a hard one, guys. I'd say in this time of lockdown, we've all been a little bit selfish. We've bemoaned the things, and we've mourned the things that couldn't happen for us. But what about the things that could happen for other people, or that we were able to do with other people and for other people? Notice prison, hungry, thirsty, clothing. Those are some of the things in this that are important. Giving. And he will say to those on the left hand, "Depart from me." Oh, we saw that in the last parable, right? Get out of here. Throw that servant away. And he will say to those on the left hand, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels." Guys, one of the things I want to point out in this passage, maybe you've never noticed it before, and cartoons do us a disservice. The devil is not in hell. Did you hear me? The devil is not in hell. The hell is not his kingdom. It's not like God's kingdom is heaven and the devil's kingdom is hell. And notice we always say up and down. That's just an idea that we've kind of made up. Hell is the devil's punishment. You know where the devil is? Right here with us on this world. The devil is with us on this world. He's not running some kind of subterranean kingdom, right? He's right here among us. The Bible says he goes around like a roaring lion, seeking who he can devour. The servants who don't do the things that God asks will be in the same punishment as the devil and his angels. Yes, those that chose to follow the devil instead of those that chose to follow God. I just thought I would pause there and let you think about that for a moment. Guys, this earth will never be perfect because the devil is here. It's heaven that will be perfect. For I was hungry and you gave me no food. I was thirsty and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger and you did not take me in. Naked and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison and you did not visit me. Then they will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you? Again, if we had known it was the king, surely we would have done that. Yeah. Why do we want to do to those that have power and title? Then he will answer them, saying, Assuredly I say, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. I have some pictures to go with the next verses, because I want us to think, who are the least of these in our society? Who are the ones that we don't see? Then he will answer them, saying, Assuredly I say, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, you did it to me. Who are the least of these? In your school, in your community, even where you worship. You know, this statistic here makes me think a lot of our congregations have single moms. I don't know all the details of why they are a single mom, but I wonder how many of us think about what it takes to be a single mom or a single parent. Well, let's just put it on both places. Do you know what a small envelope with an encouraging note and maybe a Walmart gift card could mean to them? It could mean diapers. It could mean food. It could mean something that they haven't been able to afford as a family. And a lot of us, we're not going on vacation this summer. We still have that money, I hope, budgeted. I know some of you are out of work. What about someone that you worship with that's out of work right now? Well, what about a light bill that gets paid or a water bill that gets paid? And I'm going to tell you to do it anonymously. And maybe you mail it to them with no return address. Or maybe when we come back together, you ask one of the leaders of your church to give that and say, this was given by another person here for you. Think of the times that we could encourage and help people, right? The least of these. Who is the person who sits by themselves in your place of worship? No one sits with them. I know we're so used to, we're going to go back into auditoriums where we used to have our seat. What if we all sat somewhere differently and met different people? And he will answer them, saying, Assuredly, I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. Wow. Then he will answer them, Inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. Some of you have the ability to do things internationally, in places I'll never go, in schools I'll never be in countries that are only places on a map. Do it to the least of these, and you're doing it for Jesus. Again, I keep repeating this verse because I want to make sure you hear it. Who are our least? Who are the overlooked? Who are the ones we walk by? Who are the ones we look down on? Jesus says, do it to those. And these will go into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. On that day when he divides, there's two places. Everlasting punishment or eternal life. That's what Jesus is telling in these parables. That's what he's been taught. That's what he's been leading us to, these verses. So, when it comes to the unrighteous and the righteous, the good and the bad, I've got a little chart there on your handout. You're welcome to fill out. I want you to look down this list and see which side do we follow. Which side are now again, if Jesus walks in, we're going to clear a place for him in our auditorium. We're going to let him sit in the best seat in our house. We're not going to serve him leftovers, right? We're going to cook a special meal. But someone knocks on your door and says they have a need, and we slam the door in their face. We walk by them on a street. We look at them and say, someone ought to do something about that. Well, maybe your talent is you see things like that. Your eyes are open to things like that, to the least of these. Are you doing anything about it? This is a thinking lesson this morning. This is a thinking lesson. So what are our warnings? Be ready and be fruitful. Guys, we're supposed to be doing, we don't just become Christians and sit here and wait for his return. He's given us talents. Let's go use them. And there's two ways to be greeted. Well done, good and faithful servant, or you wicked and lazy servant. Now remember, he has some people that are listening to this who he's going to leave in charge of the kingdom. And it's their job to spread it. You know, that's true in every generation. In every generation. I hope this week you'll think about what your talents are. And it's okay if it is a talent to be really good at what it is. You know, I know some people who are really good at the one thing they do. And I know some people who are good at lots of things, and that actually makes it hard for them sometimes to focus in on one thing. This week, increase your ability to see and to hear and to feel the least of these. Well, I hope I've made you think today. That was the point of this lesson. And I think that's the point that Jesus was trying to do even in his day. So let's end this week. What do we say? Wash our hands. Clean our heart. This morning I'm going to add, open our eyes and open that heart and open our ears so that we are better qualified to help the least of these. Not just so we can have a blessed day, but so they can have a blessed day too. God bless you guys. Looking forward to next week.